Well, I, for one, have really enjoyed this week. Waking up on Wednesday morning to discover that Donald Trump had entered the White House again wasn't something that I thought I would enjoy quite as much as I did. I was horrified when he won in 2016. I'm not going to lie. I was horrified by how he behaved in 2020 when he lost that election to Biden. But this time around, I was thrilled, not just by Donald Trump beating Kamala Harris, which I think was the right vote, not just for America, but probably for the world and for Britain too. But what I was most thrilled to see was the absolute huge meltdown by so many people and the wokerati, the metropolitan elite, the soy drinking, Guardian reading, great and the good, who think they know so much better than us, who think that they are the experts and we're the idiots and the bigots. And they are absolutely shell shocked that it turns out that the rest of the world doesn't think the same as them. Well, it's been blatantly obvious to me that organisations like the BBC and Sky and ITV, but mostly the BBC, are completely biased on their politics, not just sort of anti-Tory and pro-Labour and Lib Dems, but also quite clearly, anti-Brexit and pro-Remain. I mean, that was blatantly obvious back in 2016, has been so ever since. But there's no doubt at all their Trump derangement syndrome. And it's one thing to criticise him for everything he's said or done. That's fair enough. But to call him a fascist and a Nazi supporter and God knows what else, I think is going a little bit too far. I think that's what most American and British voters think too. But the BBC has sort of lost its mind in the same way that its staff were just shell-shocked and flabbergasted in 2016 by the vote to leave the European Union. And they cannot get their heads around it. I've watched so much media, listened to so much media over the last few days, just really for pure enjoyment. And from pretty much everyone, Sky, ITV, BBC, the Guardian, elsewhere, they have, I say, they've lost their technical term, freaking minds, and they are weeping and wailing and gnashing their teeth about how on earth could this awful thing happen, and why are all these awful people voting for someone that they disapprove of so much. And what's really sad is that they really will never understand. They don't understand that the candidate that they supported, Kamala Harris, wasn't very good. A woman of no substance whatsoever, who offered no substance to American voters. She didn't have any policies that would actually help their lives. She didn't really care about their legitimate concerns about the cost of living, about things like uncontrolled borders with Mexico. 11 million illegal migrants have crossed into the United States since Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were elected to the White House. We worried about a few tens of thousands of channel migrants. 11 million. That's a legitimate concern for American people, and telling all those people they're just nasty racist bigots, frankly, wasn't going to wash with the American voter anymore. Yeah, the left will never grasp why ordinary Americans, good people, will have voted for a man that they despise so much, particularly when it's Black people, when it's Latino people, when it's women. That they find utterly impossible to understand, because on the left, not just all the Democrats, but on the left, and we see this with the Labour Party in the UK as well, they divide everybody into these tight little categories. You are a category according to your sex, according to your race, according to your sexuality, whether you're trans or not. They're obsessed with dividing people into different categories, and if you're in that category, then you have to have certain views. If you're a gay man, you have to have certain views. If you're a Black woman, you have to have certain views. If you're a Latino, you have to have certain views. If you're Black, you have to have certain views. And they completely ignore that actually most people have the same concerns. They want to be able to get healthcare. They want a good education for their kids. They don't want them to be taught that actually they're born in the wrong body. They want to have law and order. They want to have border control. They want to be able to pay their bills, put gas in the tank of their car, put food on the table. And those concerns don't change because you're brown or white skinned, or because you're a man or a woman, or because you're gay or you're straight. Those concerns are exactly the same, and the left will never get it while they still think that everybody is defined by their inherent characteristics, as opposed to the lives they actually lead, and the needs they actually have, and the things they actually want. And until they can understand that, you know what, people are individuals, and they, rather than the Democrat elite, will decide what really matters to them, rather than being told what they should care about. I think what's really clear in America is that there isn't actually, apart from the MAGA people who are fanatical about Donald Trump, great love for Donald Trump. His polling is pretty bad in terms of his sort of favorability ratings and the like. But people kind of think, well, you know what? I'll ignore what the man has done or not done with a porn star and criminal convictions and charges and things because they're irrelevant to me. I'm going to vote for the person who's going to deliver for me and my family and for my country. And what they felt was that Donald Trump was the man who was going to do that rather than Kamala Harris, who was just a complete empty vessel. And where she does have views, they are extraordinarily out of touch with the average American in terms of sort of radical net zero policies, radical trans ideology, radical defund the police, supporting Black Lives Matter, you name it. She's got every wrong view that there is possible to have. And I think the key thing with Kamala Harris is that her campaign was basically, I'm a black woman, not a qualification for being president, not relevant at all. Shouldn't be a disqualification, but not a qualification. And I'm not Donald Trump. And I think not being Donald Trump isn't enough for people to vote for you when Donald Trump is actually offering voters policies, crucially, I think, on the economy, because it's always the economy stupid for all voters around the world, but also crucially on things like border control and law and order and net zero, which also impacts the economy. In fact, all of those policies are very much tied in with the cost of living and the quality of life that people have. And ordinary Americans want just the same things as ordinary Brits want. They just want to have a nice life, be safe on the streets with their family, be able to afford, a few of the nicer things, certainly to be able to pay the basic bills and necessities. And they're of the view that, a politician like Kamala Harris and like many in the Democrat leadership who does not understand those concerns, who has never had to worry about putting gas in the tanks, never had to worry about their kids getting medical treatment, that they really don't understand their day-to-day concerns. Well, I'm pretty darn sure that the Democrats will not learn the lessons from this election, which is that you need to listen to ordinary voters. But there is a lesson here for British politicians and indeed for British voters. We've seen Britain as often like as an outlier. We've seen all these other countries in Europe and America, they're moving to the right. But weirdly, Britain shifted to the left by voting in a Labour government. But I don't think that is what happened in July. I think what happened in July was voters didn't elect a Labour left-wing government. What they elected was a government that wasn't what they perceived to be a left-wing conservative government. We can see that in the poll ratings for Keir Starmer. They have plummeted since he's been in power and put in many of the policies, actually not all of them, in his manifesto. But I think the lesson for Kemi Badenoch, the brand new Tory leader, is, this shifting to the centre ground, the Blairite centre ground, which so many British politicians think is the future in this country and where you win elections, just won't hack it anymore. That's not where voters are. They are, well, I think voters are in the centre ground. Politicians' idea of the centre ground is way to the left of where voters actually are. And I think the lesson needs to be for politicians in this country, which is that, that's what's happened in America. If you don't listen to voters' reasonable and genuine and heartfelt concerns, then voters will find someone who will.